The fluorescent lights in the long, narrow hallway flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the gray linoleum floor. The school's usual cacophony had been replaced by a deafening silence, interrupted only by the faint hum of the ventilation system. It was a Friday evening, and the school was locked down for the weekend, as per usual. But this time, something was different. Amelia, a timid 10th grader with a penchant for books, had been in the school library, engrossed in her latest novel. She had lost track of time until the announcement blared over the intercom, startling her. Attention, all students and staff. This is Principal Anderson. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are initiating a lockdown protocol. Remain in your current locations and do not leave until further notice. I repeat, do not leave your current locations. Amelia's heart raced as she looked around the deserted library. Abandoning her book, she reached for her phone to text her friends, but there was no signal. Panic welled up inside her as she realized she was completely cut off from the outside world. Her breaths came out shallow and fast as she considered the possibilities of what could be happening. She decided to leave the library, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could explain the situation. As she stepped into the dimly lit hallway, she noticed that the flickering lights were casting strange shapes on the walls. The once familiar corridor seemed twisted, its proportions skewed. "Hello?" Amelia called out hesitantly, her voice echoing down the hall. There was no response. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she began to walk down the corridor, her footsteps echoing eerily. As she turned a corner, she noticed that the walls were covered in faded posters from past school events. But something was off about them. They all featured students and teachers with unnaturally wide, manic grins. Amelia quickened her pace, her fear intensifying with each step. She reached the stairwell and began to descend, hoping to find someone on the lower floors. As she descended, the temperature seemed to drop, and her breath formed frosty clouds in front of her. She clutched her arms, trying to preserve what little warmth she had. Reaching the ground floor, Amelia found herself in the school's deserted cafeteria. The tables were set with trays of half-eaten food, as if the students and staff had vanished in the middle of their meal. The silence was oppressive, and Amelia's footsteps sounded deafening in the empty space. She noticed a flickering light coming from the kitchen at the far end of the room. With cautious steps, she approached it, her heart pounding in her chest. As she pushed open the swinging doors, the sight that greeted her made her gasp in horror. The kitchen was in disarray, pots and pans strewn about as if they had been violently tossed aside. In the center of the chaos stood a figure, its back turned to her. It was the school's janitor, Mr. Jenkins, but something was horribly wrong. His hunched form was twisted, his limbs contorted at unnatural angles. He muttered incoherently to himself as he scraped a knife across the kitchen's stainless steel countertops. Amelia's voice quivered as she called out to him. "Mr. Jenkins, are you okay?" The janitor slowly turned to face her, and what Amelia saw sent a wave of terror coursing through her veins. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his face contorted into a grotesque smile that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. He moved towards her with a slow, shambling gait, the knife still clutched in his gnarled hand. Amelia stumbled backward, her heart racing. She turned and ran back into the cafeteria, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding before her. As she reached the doors, she heard Mr. Jenkins's deranged laughter echoing behind her. She needed to find a place to hide, to wait out this nightmarish ordeal. The library seemed like the safest bet, so she retraced her steps, hoping to make it back there undetected. But when she arrived, she found the door locked from the inside. Desperation set in. As Amelia frantically scanned the hallway, she spotted an open classroom nearby and rushed inside, locking the door behind her. The room was dimly lit, and the walls were adorned with children's drawings, all depicting grotesque and nightmarish scenes of violence and chaos. Amelia's breath came out in ragged gasps as she crouched behind a desk, trying to make herself as small as possible. She listened intently, hoping to hear any sign of approaching danger. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours as she waited in that dark and silent room. Then, from somewhere in the distance, she heard a whisper, barely audible but unmistakably human. It was a voice she recognized, her best friend, Sarah. Amelia's heart soared with relief, and she moved toward the door, planning to unlock it and reunite with her friend. But before she could reach the door, the lights in the classroom flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The whispering grew louder, and Amelia realized that it was not just Sarah's voice. It was a chorus of voices, all murmuring unintelligibly, their words carrying a malevolent and otherworldly tone. Amelia froze in fear as she felt a cold breath on her neck, followed by a sinister, guttural voice right beside her ear. "You should have stayed in your library, Amelia," it hissed. She spun around, but there was nothing there, only the darkness and the haunting whispers. In her mind's eye, she saw Mr. Jenkins's twisted smile, the manic grins in the posters, and the horrifying drawings on the walls. She realized that whatever had taken over the school was something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. And as the night wore on, Amelia huddled in the dark classroom, surrounded by the echoes of madness. She knew that her fight for survival had only just begun.